Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink and an experiment. I've been showing a bunch of videos recently doing rainbow with 3 colors using all sorts of products. And especially my Nuvo shimmer powders, which I will have a link to the playlist with like 24 videos showing all different ways. This way I haven't used before. And I started with this stencil from Simon Says Stamp. This is the tin tile stencil. And I sprayed it with PIXIE spray, which is a repositionable adhesive. Make sure you always use this like outside, well ventilated, etc. But you spray it, you let it sit for a minute, and then it's just a very light tack. And I reuse my stencils, over and over again. I don't purposely wash off the tackiness. I usually can get a few uses out of it. It just depends. So anyway, I press the stencil onto some Canson XL watercolor paper and then watch me do what I've told you guys not to do. AKA squeeze my Nuvo bottles. That's what I did. And I ended up with a pile, but scooped some of it out because I didn't need it. So I'm using my kind of recent go-to of colors of the Nuvo shimmer powder. So Cherry Bomb and Solar Flare and Blue Blitz. And I put them in just this random little plastic palette I had. Added some water. There's no formula here. It was just powder and water, no specific amounts. And then I just used my Tonic spoon to stir it up. A toothpick probably would have worked even better, but this was literally sitting here. So I just used this, but again, toothpick would have worked perfectly. So stirred everything up so that the powder and the water is fully mixed. And then I'm going to use blending brushes. I could have used paint brushes. I don't know. I had it in my head. I'm positive I saw someone do this on Instagram and I can't for the life of me remember. For some reason, I'm positive it was Bibiana Cameron. She does beautiful cards. So Bibiana, if it was your idea, just let me know, because I looked and I couldn't find it and my brain was just, but I'm positive it was her. She makes, again, beautiful cards. Usually she goes by Bibi Cameron, Bibi Cameron. If I remember, I'll link to her Instagram. She does just phenomenal cards, phenomenal, and she just comes up with the coolest ways to use things. So yeah, I'll link to her Instagram in the description box. Anywho, back to this. I was using blending brushes. I started with the yellow, blended it, did the pink, did the blue. I was wiping them off also on a baby wipe, kind of in between, because the color was intense. And I also thought I would show, this is a little Boon, I don't remember the actual name for it, but again, I'll have a link to this. Tim Holtz showed this in the video. I've been using these for a similar one for years. I have it in my kitchen, right beside my sink. They're meant for like holding baby bottles and that sort of thing to dry, but they're great in the craft room for stencils and tools. Prop them up, let them dry. And again, I don't normally dry or wash my blending brushes, but with something like this, I would recommend washing after use. I just used soap and water. Because there are, like a resin type, a binder in those powders, and I'm not sure what would happen to the brushes. I'm sure even if it dried in the brushes, you'd be able to wash it out later anyway, but I wouldn't use those brushes on an ink pad, So I wash them, put them in the dryer, and then they'll sit and dry they take forever to dry. That's why I never wash my brushes. But anyway, let everything dry. I splattered this background with my Starry Colors palette to get the gold splatter. Use my fan brush and my splat box. Let that dry. Trim that down. While everything was drying, I did all my die cutting. So I pulled out the Bold Thanks wafer die that came out forever ago. It's one of my faves. I die cut white cardstock, 3 pieces with that, as well as Simon's matte gold cardstock. And after die cutting, I stacked all these together with craft tacky glue, so I've got a nice dimensional sentiment. And then I'd also pulled out the etched laurel leaves wafer die. It's another oldie but goodie favorite. And I had die cut some vellum with that. I thought it would just be kind of a nice backer to the sentiment. And with it being vellum, it's not going to take away from the very bright and colorful background that I just love. I love how those colors mix together. It worked. it worked really well. I was quite pleased. This little experiment, just yes. Anyway, the vellum leaves, I just applied the Kuretake glue just to kind of the spine, basically, of the leaf, or the branch, really. So, applied the Kuretake glue, press that into place, put the glue on the back of the sentiment. I'm going to use my little T-square ruler to make sure I get this straight. Once that's all in place, I'm just going to set acrylic blocks on top, just hold everything down, let that dry. While it's doing that, I grabbed another scrap of white cardstock, and once I figured out what sentiment I was going to use, trimmed down the little piece of white cardstock so that I can put it in my MISTI. And I'm going to use a sentiment from this Thankful Magnolia stamp set. This is one of the newer ones that Simon had come out with, one of the like big florals. And now that it's sitting on my desk, be prepared to see more videos using it because I haven't inked up the big, huge floral yet. And you guys know me and the big, large florals. But anyway, back to this. I pulled out a sentiment from the set. I used my anti-static powder tool on the cardstock. I inked up the sentiment with clear embossing ink, stamped that onto the cardstock, and then I'm going to coat this with some detailed gold embossing powder. So got my big old container of embossing powder here. People always ask about this, like how many like actual containers are in there. I honestly have no idea. Probably 5-ish. Nobody needs this much. Just because I do this as a job, I get sent product, you know, I dump it all into the container. Yeah. Anywho, one container of embossing powder will last a regular crafter a very long time. You don't need, you know, these great big sandwich containers that I got that have, literally 5+ things of embossing powder in them, you know? Anyway, I'm just all over the place today. So, did my heat embossing. The remainder of that cardstock for the sentiment, I just trimmed with scissors and stacked those behind the actual sentiment, you know, rather than using foam tape because the scraps were literally right there. So I adhered those, did the same thing, put the acrylic blocks, pushed it out of the way. And then my stencil, because this I did like wash with soap and water because that like, you know, shimmer powder's all over it. I did lose the stick this time, so I just resprayed it with the PIXIE spray. And then after this, like I put it just back in the packaging. It's still got a bit of stick to it, so the next time I go to use it, it'll be good to go. So for the inside of the card, I masked off where the square line is, put the stencil in place, and then I'm using 3 of Simon's Positively Saturated inks. I'm using Lemonade, Watermelon, and Cadet. And I've sped this up in editing, but I'm using a very light hand. Like I'm barely touching the brush into the ink pad, and then I wipe off the first bit of that ink onto scrap paper there on the side, and then I'm not pressing hard because I just want it to be light. I don't want it to be super intense, you know, really bright and vivid like the front of the card, because I want this to be legible when you write to the recipient. So I just went on, and then after I blended it, I removed the stencil, and it's so satisfying. You know, it's the same thing as like heat embossing, like those certain things that are just like, oh, this is why I do what I do, you know? So the inside was done, removed the stencil, removed the Post-it tape, reinforced the fold on the card with my Teflon bone folder. And then I decided to pop up this card front with Simon's Big Mama foam tape. Big Mama, because it is a massive roll. It's huge. It's like probably the same size or maybe bigger than a vinyl record. Just again, to give the idea. I've shown it in other videos when it's new. Huge roll. But the actual foam tape itself is thin. It's like about 1/16 of an inch, I think. Nice and thin, so it's not too bulky. So I coated the back of this with the foam tape. And then I'm going to pop this into place on my card. And y'all know I'm going to add bling. So I pulled out some gold confetti. I like how I say pulled out as if, you know, it was actually stored properly. It was in a pile of all the random embellishments I've been using lately. Anyway, pulled that out and added a bunch of these kind of sprinkled around the die cut laurel leaves. So adhered those into place with dabs of Kuretake glue. And that finished off the card. I had a heck of a time trying to show the shimmer. It is a bit more subtle than it normally is with these shimmer powders because I think, you know, using the blending brush and like in some ways, I kind of removed some of the shimmer doing it this way, but in real life, it's there. Like, I can kind of show it here with the flashlight on my phone. Like, you can kind of see it on the purple area, and you can kind of see it on like the yellowy orange area right there. Right there, you know? The shimmer is there. It's really pretty in real life, but yeah. You know, my filming skills still, even though I do this as a full-time job, still not up to par. But anywho, it was still a really fun card to make, and it's so bright and cheerful, and I had fun. And then I paired the card with one of Simon's gold envelopes just to tie it all together. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll link to all the supplies I used, and like I said, I will have a link to a playlist here at the end with all the videos I've done so far using the Nuvo shimmer powders. So check them out if you haven't, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.